I'm with Michael Warren. This is June the, 7th?
Yes.
6th?
7th.
7th, 2016. And this is the LCS Oral History Project. So, Michael, I have a few personal questions. Your full name?
It's Michael George Warren.
And the date and place of your birth?
It was July 23rd, 1941. And I was born in Sevenoaks, Kent, in England. It was actually because my mother was evacuated from London during the war.
I've never been to Sevenoaks, Kent. You didn't grow up there?
No, I was just born there. I didn't.
Londoner?
I'm a Londoner.
Okay. The highest level of education you achieved?
Well, I did postgraduate year at Cambridge. I got my degree there, and then I did an extra year after that.
And what was your degree in?
Mathematics.
Oh dear. How intimidating. Oh. What was your career prior to moving to Lakeside?
I did actuarial work. I was an actuary. Do you know what an actuary is?
Yes, I do. They work for the insurance companies usually. And they, yes.
Related to using statistics to guess the future, or estimate, I guess.
What do you think the chances are of Donald Trump getting elected?
I wouldn't want to bet on it. I don't think he's likely to be elected, but you never know. Crazy things do happen.
I thought actuaries actually were not restricted to, but focused on lifespan.
Well, yes, but not solely that. I mean, those are what insurance company actuaries do, or people working on pension plans. But I did a number of different things. I did some work for American Express. You know, they have these benefits on their card. If you rent a car, you don't have to buy the rental car coverage, things like that. So it's not entirely on lifespan.
And what do you project? How many
Anything
people are
which
going to
you
use
get
this?
statistics on. I'm sorry?
Well, I'm trying to think. Use that example. What would American Express want to know?
Well, they want to know what it might cost, because it's a free benefit on the card, but of course it's not really free. It costs money, and you have to estimate what it might cost, because they can build that into their accounts. And initially we were actually making a few mistakes, but we did learn, and we had it insured initially, so the insurance company paid for our mistakes. But then eventually we figured out what was happening. One thing that was happening, for example, is that the rental car companies are pretty smart. So if they have a car with a few dents in it, they wait till the cardholder rents it, and then when he brings it back, they'll say, "Oh look, there are these dents." He said, "Well, I don't think anything happened when I was driving." He said, "Don't worry, probably when you were parked, just sign here, it won't cost you anything." And they'd get their car repaired at American Express expense. So that sort of thing. You have to, I guess, people are rational in the sense that they'll take advantage if possible.
Car rental companies is a whole different topic, isn't it? Okay, how long have you lived at Lakeside?
I came down here at the end of 2000, so that's 16 years.
And what or who made you decide to move here?
Well, we were living in Toronto, and I was getting to the point where we were thinking about what will we do when I retire, and where can we retire to, and my daughter saw an ad in the paper for a slideshow being put on at the Howard Johnson's, and I guess it was a bunch of real estate people who were putting it on. And it said, you know, thinking of retiring to Mexico, you know, come and see the slideshow. Well, we thought that might be interesting. So we went and saw the slideshow, which was mostly about this area. And we'd never been here or thought about it before. We had holidays in places like Acapulco and so on, but not to this area. And it looked really interesting, so we thought, well, we'll just go down and see what it's like. And so, you know, after a month or two, we booked and came, and we didn't come with the real estate people. We just came independent. And the travel agent had no idea where to put us, so he said, "There's this bed and breakfast place that's run by Canadians." He said, "It's probably all right." Well, it turned out that we were staying at the Nueva Posada, which was the nicest hotel in town. So that was a good start. And that's how we initially came here, and then we kind of fell in love with the area. And, you know, there are many advantages to living here, as you know. And my wife in particular hated the Canadian winters, too long. And so this was a beautiful climate, and quite a few expats in the area as well. And quite near an international airport. There's a lot of advantages.
We actually, Paul, my husband Paul, found an article in the Globe and Mail, and that's what made us aware of the place. And it talked about how many Canadians lived here. And he cut it out of the Globe and Mail, brought it home from work, stuck it in our desk. And about 2 years later, when it was getting close to retirement, he dug it out and he read it. So it's thanks to the Globe and Mail. Interesting. Okay, so we know why you left. It was the weather.
Well, not just the weather, but that was a factor. The weather and the affordability, and it just felt like being on holiday all the time.
What possessions?
And we had been abroad quite a bit, so we weren't worried about it being a third world country. We had done quite a bit of traveling to India, for example, which is really a fourth world country by comparison. So we weren't sort of scared of coming to Mexico. In fact, we enjoyed the culture.
Okay, what possessions did you bring with you?
Well, we probably brought too much. We spent money on having some stuff shipped, which was quite expensive. And a lot of the furniture, we could have got very nice furniture here, so we probably brought too many things. We did bring some furniture down and some, you know, some possessions that we valued. But I think we brought too much.
What was the journey like?
Well, the first time we flew down initially, I remember that the day that we sort of finally made the final trip, we had bought a house by then. This was at the end of 2000. And we left Toronto in December 31st. It was freezing cold in Toronto, and we had about 8 suitcases. And, you know, I almost died getting them out of the car and into the terminal. And the same day we arrived here, and it was beautifully warm, and we went to a New Year's Eve party someone was giving. It was just, I don't know, like a small miracle. So that was December 31st, 2000. Subsequently, I did drive down, which was a long journey.
Yes.
And we didn't have any problems, but it's a long drive.
What did the family members who stayed behind think of your move?
Well, I don't have a big family. My daughter really was the one who suggested we look at Mexico, so I think she thought it was a good idea. And in fact, she visited subsequently quite a few times. So we had friends who thought we were crazy, but the family members were okay with it.
Can you remember your first impressions of Lakeside?
I thought it was beautiful. I guess my first impressions, well, as I say, we bought this house which did need quite a lot of renovation, and Marianne came before me because I was still working and she was in charge of the renovations. So she sort of became acclimatized. She acquired a dog because she was all by herself and she felt more secure. She got this big German Shepherd. And then she emailed me and she said, well, you can carry on working if you like, I'm staying here. So anyway, they were favorable. I mean, things like the concerts that were available at the auditorium and the theater, so I was very impressed.
Now I'm going to switch topics. 3 questions about Neil James.
Thursday maybe, huh?
Did you know her personally?
No.
Alright, maybe
Okay.
you'll see me.
So, I don't have any more questions about Neil James, but this is a good place to ask you about Marianne, your wife's. She founded 2, or made 2 initiatives that have something to do with LCS. One of them being Open Circle, I
Right.
understand, which is held here,
Right.
and the other the Neil James Lecture Series. So let's start with the Neil James Lecture Series. Tell me what she did and when it started.
Well, Marianne had a PhD in Asian religions, specifically Indian religions. So she was very knowledgeable, and this was, you know, her pet topic, as it were. And she had a lot of material and slides that would make a nice slideshow and so on. And she thought it would be good to have a lecture series that she would give. And then the idea evolved into having a sort of a more serious, it was called the Neil James Lecture, once a month, and she said she would organize that. I think previously there'd been a committee set up to organize something similar, and they spent so much time on you know, bureaucratic stuff, like what is our mission statement and all. They never got anything done. So after, you know, this was a sort of futile committee, Marianne said, well, I'll do it. And she was like that. She was very, what shall I say, no nonsense. She got things done. And she gave the first lecture herself, and subsequently she gave a series on Bhakti in Hindu religions. And it was really interesting. Those who've been to it said it was wonderful, and it really was. And she ended up, it was about a 10-lecture series. She ended up with an Indian food lunch at the end.
I do believe I attended that.
Did you attend that?
Yes, I did.
Well, you'll remember that.
Yes, it was wonderful.
I should say that Marianne's no longer alive. She died in 2004 rather suddenly, which was quite a shock. We didn't know that she was so sick, but it turned out that she had cancer, and she died very suddenly. And it took me a while to get over that. She was my first wife. I now have a very nice second wife, Joan. But I mean, it took me several years before I met Joan. The other thing you wanted me to talk about was the Open Circle.
Yes.
And there was a group when we first came in 2000 or 2001 called New Dimensions that was meeting at Roy and Joan Foreman's house. Mm-hmm. And it was a small group that met on Sundays at their house, and we joined it. And of course Marianne was able to contribute. And it was just sort of like a meditation group, or a sort of semi-spirit, sort of quasi-spiritual group. Mm-hmm. And every Sunday there would be a speaker. Somebody would talk about some aspect of religion, or Buddhism, or Jainism, or Hinduism, or some branch of Christianity, something to do with a religious topic. And that was a nice group. It was about, I don't know, 25 people or so. And as I say, it was at Roy and Joan Foreman's house, which was on the Carretera at the time. And then sometime in 2001, I forget the exact date, but after we'd been going there for several months, the foreman said, well, we're a bit burned out. You'll have to sort of find somewhere else to meet. And we looked around, and we met at a few different places, some various restaurants and so on. it wasn't very satisfactory. We were sort of an itinerant group. And then Marianne and I suggested that we could meet at the Lake Chapala Society, which is closed on Sundays. And everyone said, oh no, they won't allow that. It's sort of religious and it's against their terms of reference and so on. But anyway, we applied, and in the application we didn't exactly lie, but we didn't use the word religious. We said the talks were metaphysical, which was true.
Yes.
And anyway, they said okay. And we, as you know, Open Circle, the name Open Circle wasn't there at that time. There was a meeting to decide on a new name. And I forget who came up with the name, but it was actually a good idea. Somebody came up with that suggestion. And of course it's taken off since then. It seems to meet a need on Sundays. You know, it's not an organized religious group, but and of course the talks are not all religious now. You can't get 52 weeks a year with sort of spiritual speakers. But you know, topics like the environment or diet or health related topics or poetry readings, things of that nature. Some of the talks are spiritual, but not all. And I think now there's about, I don't know, 150, 200 people on Sundays. It varies by season.
What year did it begin?
2001.
2001.
And we got permission to
15 years.
Yeah. And
Now,
it's been very successful. Obviously, as I say, meets a need, and it's quasi-social too. People like to meet each other.
When I got here, I remember going, and is this true that Marianne was in fact in charge of the speakers?
For a few years she did
Yeah.
that. Her job was to get speakers every Sunday, which is not an easy job.
No.
And actually the hardest part of the job is sometimes saying no to people. You know?
Yes, I know. Everybody has something to talk about.
But anyway, she was quite successful in getting good speakers. But it's not an easy job. Other people have since done that. And can't remember everybody.
Now, you did mention to me that Marianne's ashes are actually here.
Yes, I meant to show them to you. They're under a little plaque at the back of the sala down there.
Now, does LCS normally
They don't
allow
normally.
that?
No, it's a privilege.
Yes.
I was very honored. Well, she was cremated in Toronto, and of course, when they give you the urn, it's really heavy. I don't know if you've experienced that, but it weighs quite a bit. So I did distribute, most of her ashes at places in Canada that were meaningful to her. But I brought a small amount down here, and that's under the plaque.
And LCS invited you to do that?
Well, I got permission to do that.
Well, you'll have to show us after we finish the last question.
Yeah,
I'd
it's a
like to
nice
see
little
that.
plaque.
It's very special. I think the only other person that's buried here is Neil James.
Maybe. Yeah, under the tree there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Was there anything else you wanted to say about those two topics?
No, I think we've covered it.
The Neil James lectures, did you notice that in the last OHO, Delago, that they're starting a new lecture series now? They're calling it CAP.
Oh, maybe it's a similar thing.
Well, it's 3 different lecturers, 3 different courses. They're about 8 weeks. And I think that sort of activity, one's on knowing Mexico through Mexican literature. It's a wonderful idea for LCS to actually do that, which kind of leads into my next section.
Well, yeah, if I can just clarify, the original concept of the Neil James lectures was that there would be, there are people down here that are very knowledgeable experts on certain subjects, not all academics, but some of them are academics. And the idea was to, tap that resource and keep the level of the lecture at a fairly high level. I gave one myself, actually.
You gave one on Copernicus or Galileo?
Galileo, I think. No, I also gave one on Fermat's last theorem.
Oh, I skipped that one.
Oh, you don't know about Fermat's last theorem?
No.
Well, you know who Fermat was, a very famous French mathematician in the 16th century, very smart guy, was brilliant in fact, and his big topic was number theory, like prime numbers. And, okay, well anyway, he was a lawyer actually. He was just an amateur mathematician, but he was brilliant. And he said, I have a wonderful proof of this, which this margin is too small to contain. But he never wrote it down. And so nobody knows if he had a proof or not. Well, for 350 years, no one could prove it or disprove it. They thought he might be right, but they couldn't prove it. And there was a prize offered, I think, by a German industrialist who claimed that his life had been saved by this, because he was going to commit suicide, and then he decided to do some math instead, and he got distracted and he forgot to shoot himself. So anyway, he offered a prize of several million, I forget how much, quite a large amount in German marks, at the beginning of the 20th century, for anyone who could either prove or disprove Fermat's theorem. And nobody was able to until actually towards the end of the 20th century. There was an English mathematician who actually did manage to prove it, using some very complicated and obscure and difficult methods, which obviously Fermat wouldn't have known about. But anyway, so that's, I guess, the end of that story. But it's an interesting story.
And that was your
I gave a talk.
lecture?
Yes, I gave a talk on that topic. There's a book in the library here on that, which anyone can read. It's not difficult.
That's what you say. I don't think I'll
I
try
think
it.
it's called Fermat's Last Theorem. It's a good book. It's by a man called Singh, S-I-N-G-H.
If you say so, Michael. I'm going to move on to the Lake
Okay.
Chapala
Well,
Society.
Galileo you might have enjoyed more.
It was a very good talk.
That's also based on a book from the library here called Galileo's Daughter. If you read, it's in the library here. He had a daughter. He was never married actually, but he had children. And she was a nun, and they had a lifelong correspondence.
Okay, Michael. Lake Chapala Society.
I'm getting off topic.
Yes. What was the Lake Chapala Society like when you first arrived?
I guess it wasn't very different from how it is now. I mean, it was a meeting place. I don't think they had a coffee shop then, but there was the library, and I think when I first arrived there wasn't the gazebo down there, so it was a bit smaller, but it was similar, very similar.
And what need did it meet in the community, would you say?
I think it meets a need for people who, particularly people when they first come, to sort of get acquainted with other expats and to socialize and also to find out what's going on. I mean, I think that's important. And information, you know, where do I go, which doctors should I go to, things like that.
Yeah.
How do I register for IMSS? All these kind of questions.
I volunteered for 5 years at the information desk, and we had a meeting. We were looking at how to provide information, and several people thought that, you know, people can go online now and get all the information they need. And some of us pointed out that, yeah, but they don't want to go online. They want to come and be reassured that whatever they're about to do makes sense. They,
Yes,
you know,
they want to have a person, talk to a real person.
They do. They want to know they're doing the right thing, too. Are you currently a member of LCS?
Actually, I'm not.
Oh, dear.
I used to be. But,
Tut, tut.
well,
Have you seen the organization evolve? Well, you said it's big.
I think it's bigger. I think there are perhaps more social activities than there used to be, like, you know, events and celebrations and, you know, places where there are times, as you know, when people can have like a party here.
They're having a picnic, I think.
Picnic.
Maybe the picnic is over. I'm not
So I think that's an evolution. There may, I don't know if it's evolved in terms, well, you just told me about these new lectures. I think perhaps because I'm interested in various topics, I think lectures are a good idea. But it takes a lot of effort. Somebody has to organize them.
Yes, they have, check it out. It's in the Oho. And I was quite surprised and pleased. They have a gentleman with a PhD who's coming from Puerto Vallarta, or is here. Rick Rhoda, who's given lectures before.
Oh, I know Rick, yeah.
I think it's a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
So, last question about LCS. Do you think there's an important role for LCS to play now and into the future?
I think so long as people continue to come down here and, you know, after they've retired and worked somewhere in Canada or the United States, there's always going to be an important role. Also, there's a school, isn't there?
The Children's Art Program?
No, the school up on...
The Wilkes Center.
The Wilkes Center.
Yes, where they teach.
They teach English lessons.
Yes.
I think that's quite important too.
Yes.
I did some teaching there.
Did you?
Yeah. And I think that's quite important. Not everyone seems to know about it.
It's hard to find. I don't know why I find it hard to find the Wilkes.
It's sort of hidden away.
Yeah, I think it is too.
But
It's right next door to Mary Ellen's art gallery.
anyway, I mean that sort of role is when you first arrive, particularly. I mean, it's a foreign country. You don't quite know what's what or how to find things, or you know, deal with the renewal of your driver's license or whatever. All these kind of things. I mean, Mexican bureaucracy can be difficult. Actually, I could tell you a story about when I first applied for FM3. When we first came down, I put my application through in Toronto at the embassy there, or the consulate, I guess it's called. And boy, they made it difficult. I think the guy was just having a sort of power trip. You know, he made me keep on coming back because I hadn't got the right forms, or they hadn't been done in triplicate or hadn't been translated. And anyway, and then he started saying, because I said, we need the FM3 because we're shipping furniture and otherwise we'll have to pay duty. And he said, well, you'll just have to pay duty, won't you? And he was really unpleasant. And then, but of course you can't get angry because it makes it worse. And then he said, well, I said, my wife's, you know, down here renovating the house and I'm still working. He said, don't you love your wife?
Oh,
And I thought, what business is it of yours? You know? Right.
oh dear.
Anyway, I eventually managed to sort of make an end run around him because I found out the name of the vice consul who was more senior. But even then you have to be very diplomatic, you know, you can't say this guy's an asshole. You have to sort of say, well, I think there may have been some misunderstanding or something. If you could help me clear that up. So anyway, I did eventually get it. I mean, he was really, I guess he was having fun.
Oh.
Anyway.
There's a wonderful line in the book, oh gosh, Visit to Don Octavio. Have you read that? By Sybil Shepherd?
No.
No, Sybil Bedford. Well, Sybil Bedford has written a book about this area called A Visit to Don Octavio. And she actually ended up being, she was British, she ended up being the official biographer for Aldous Huxley. So she's no, you know, amateur anything. But she had a line about when she crossed the border by train way back when to come to Mexico. The temporarily powerful meet the temporarily powerless.
Yes, right, exactly.
It's never changed. Okay, we're going to talk about the environment. 3 questions, and then Mexico in general. So, describe the quality of the physical environment of Lakeside then and now.
Well, there was only one traffic light when I came, and now there are 5.
When they're working.
Yes. So there's a lot more traffic, and I guess there's been more building going on. And of course there wasn't a Walmart then. The lake went very low at one point, soon after we came down here. And fortunately it's recovered. I can remember, I forget which year it was, you must remember, 2004 or something. You had to get a bus from the end of the pier in Chapala to get to the lake.
Yeah.
Remember that? But it's come back remarkably well. Um,
There was a baseball diamond on where the lake now is.
Right.
It was big enough for a baseball diamond.
the quality of the physical environment. I mean, it hasn't. I mean, it's wonderful, really. It hasn't really changed too much. It's still a very pleasant place to live.
And the social environment?
Well, there's quite a bit of. Well, there's a lot of cultural events. There's the theatre, of course. I'm very interested in the theatre. And subsequently, there's Naked Stage has also started doing play readings, and then there's the concerts. I remember thinking when I first came that it was just wonderful that you could get this very high quality concerts in this little Mexican village.
Well, the fact we have an auditorium.
Yeah. And socially, I think there's a good interaction, generally speaking, with the Mexican people. I mean, I guess there could be a fear that because of the expats driving prices up, that the Mexicans actually could end up not being able to afford to live here. That hasn't really happened. It could happen. It's happened in Whistler, I believe.
Yes, it's happened in Vancouver. The average house in Vancouver is now over $1 million.
But I think it's still a nice mixed quality environment. And I think Neil James is partly responsible, really, because she taught all these artists and helped them with their careers, and that's fostered that kind of interaction.
Have you ever been here on a Saturday morning to see the children's art program?
Not really, no.
Because some of the artists that she trained as children are now teaching Mexican children art, and it's really, it just warms the cockles of your heart. It's really cute to see.
But I think that's a major difference, say, between here and San Miguel, for example.
Yes.
I think there's much more friendliness and interaction between the two cultures.
Alrighty, we have a few questions about Mexico.
Oh, well, I guess we just talked about
Yes, we did. I'm moving down.
Okay.
What are the 3 most important world events that have happened while you have lived in Mexico?
Oh boy. Well,
See you Thursday, Brenda.
I guess world events, you tend to think of disasters,
Okay, I'll
like
be checking about this
the
one.
bombing of the Twin Towers and the events in Afghanistan and so on. 3 most important. That's a tough question. I would like to think of one that's good, not a kind of bombing or disaster. When did Mandela get released? Was that after 2000? I mean, that's an important event.
Yes, it is. And Obama getting elected is.
I guess having a black, or at least half black president is unusual. It's a new thing for the States. But mostly they seem to be disasters is the ones that you think of. Really?
I know. Well, we'll go on. I don't like that question.
No, all right. I don't much like it either.
Maybe we'll cross it out. What do you love about Mexico?
Food, culture, favorite holiday. What do I love about Mexico?
Have you traveled
The people.
extensively?
Well, yes, quite a bit. I've been to various places. Oaxaca, and Guanajuato, and some of these other towns. The people are very friendly, I find. I mean, there's this myth that, you're going to be swindled or something at every turn. That hasn't happened to me. In fact, I've had some good experiences. We had a breakdown. The car suddenly stopped in the middle of the road in Guadalajara. And there was traffic. It was 3 lanes, and there was traffic pouring down each side. And the policeman came on his little motor scooter and helped get the car over to one side. And then he phoned on his cell phone, and I guess he called a garage place, and they came also on a motor scooter, and they got the car started, and then I had to follow them to the garage. I mean, these people were all very helpful, and they could have sold me a new battery, you know, and made some money, but they said it wasn't necessary. They just cleaned it off and put some distilled water in. I mean, it was a really very positive experience. So mostly I find Mexican people very friendly and helpful. I'm not crazy about Mexican food, to tell you the truth. Food, culture. It just feels more relaxed somehow. I mean, everybody in Toronto, as you know, is all stressed out and walking around talking on their phones. Here it's been like being back in the 1950s,
Yes, it
which
is.
I like.
Especially if you hang out in the plaza. I used to live on Hidalgo, and in the evenings, if I was bored, we'd come down, walk down, have an ice cream cone, and it just reminded me of my childhood. And the old people were sitting on the benches, little kids are playing, teenagers are kissing. Everybody was down in the plaza, which is very
Yeah.
50s. Okay, did you interact frequently with the Mexican community?
Well, as I said, I did teach English at the Wilkes
Yes.
Center, and of course the students are Mexicans. I was quite impressed with how keen they were to learn. Some of them very smart. So that was certainly an interaction.
How long did you do that?
2 or 3 years. Then I guess I just decided not to do it after a while, but I did do it for 2 or 3. I quite enjoyed it. You get to meet some really nice Mexicans. I remember one girl, and she was only about 20, and she was really smart. And in the exam, she got 98 out of 100, and she said, "How did I lose 2 points?" But you know, there's a sad end to that story, because she got married. I think she came from San Juan, Kosovo, and her husband wouldn't let her out of the house, wouldn't let her work or do anything. She was probably smarter than he was.
Yeah.
But you know, that's the culture. Which I in a way, because I said to her, you should take computer courses or do something.
Yeah.
But she.
Okay, I'm going to go on to question number 5 here. Name a few Mexicans that have touched your life here.
Well, there was a man called Gustavo. Do you know Gustavo? Who was doing the renovations for Marianne, and he and Marianne got on very well, by the way. And he was really great, very honest, very hardworking. He's a self-made man in many ways, because his father just has that place on the Carretera that sells fountains and concrete garden ornaments. And he's built up this business, and he keeps several, families employed, and he's a good man. I still see him occasionally. I guess we were lucky, but I was impressed by him. Very helpful, very honest, did good job. And as I say, he and Marianne became quite friendly. They really sort of respected each other. A few Mexicans who touched your life. I have to confess, I don't really know that many Mexicans. I mean, like most people down here, I'm sort of in the expat community.
Yes.
I mean, he's one. I mean, we have a gardener and a maid and so on, but that's different.
I don't interact with, for one thing, I don't speak Spanish, but I don't have
That's the
opportunities.
problem. It's the
But my
language,
husband, who plays tennis, believe it or not, meets way more Mexican people than me. Lots of Mexican tennis players, and they have a wonderful time. And I'm always impressed because, he doesn't think about it; it just happens, and that's nice. Okay.
Touched your life.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You can if you
Well,
think
we
of
use
something.
Dr. Leon. I like him.
Yes.
Not everyone does, I believe, but he's always been good to me. I don't know about touched your life. I mean, medical things become more important as you get older.
I think I've seen you in Dr. Leon's
Yeah, you-
office the odd time.
You probably have. He's a good man, I think.
Yes, and a very caring man.
Well, I think his big asset is that he has a lot of contacts. He may not be expert in everything, but he knows who to go to.
Yeah. Okay. How about expats? Are there any early expats that you know that have influenced the community?
What do you mean by early?
Well, you can only talk about
In the 20th century, 1900, something?
no, anybody you've met here. I mean, Marianne, your
Well-
own wife, obviously
Well,
influenced the community.
Yes,
Open Circle
yes, she did.
is
right. Well, I was involved, I've been involved with the theatre quite a bit. So, I mean, there's people like Roseanne Wilshire who does a lot with the theatre
Yes,
and also
yes.
helps to organize the concert series,
Northern Lights.
Northern Lights.
Yeah. Well, just thinking about up to date, when I think about the theater, I think of Peter Luciano and this whole broadcasting the National Theater.
Well, that's quite an kind of an improvement in what's
Yes.
available.
I mean, I think that's amazing.
Yeah. And
It's not exactly historic, but
Well, for 200 pesos, you can get to see an opera from the Royal Opera House in London.
I know, without going out of town.
You know how much that would cost you in London?
No.
Huge amount.
So, is there
That kind of thing,
is there
yeah.
anybody else in the theater community that you can think of? Roseanne Wilshire. I remember what was his name? Todd. Remember Todd?
Todd Johnson.
Yes.
He actually helped me quite a bit because I had to do an article for the OHO on the early history of the theatre. I don't know if you read it, but I had to do quite a bit of research, and he was helpful
Yeah.
on how that got started.
When did that appear? When was
It was
that?
sometime last year.
Oh, really?
Well, it was supposed to coincide with the 50th anniversary of the founding of the
Well,
theater.
it should still be online.
Oh yeah.
I'll look it up because that's interesting.
But he helped me quite a bit because he had an amazing memory. And of course he was familiar with a lot of the earlier people who were down here. I also belonged to a poetry group. Did you know I was a poet?
Of course, I know you're a poet.
Anyway, so there are people that, I guess I could mention Jim Tipton. He's been a very positive influence.
Well, and Alex Grattan, if you think about the writers
Alex
group.
organizes the writers group.
How long has that been going? 30 years or something?
A long time.
Yeah.
I forget how long, but yeah, they announced the other day how many meetings there'd been, and
I
it
know.
was something like 375 or something like that.
Well, I think it's a thing we don't think about because it's just sort of there, but the fact that there's been a writers group meeting continuously here
Right.
twice a month for decades. And,
Right.
and Alex Grattan, who is the editor of the
Yeah.
Ojo del Lago, began that. And I think his rules were really funny. There was no secretary, no treasurer, there were no rules. I think the rule was you showed up.
Well, that's pretty much still the rule. You show up, but they do have a list now. You have to put
Yes.
your name down in advance if you want to read.
But I mean, really, it's pretty loosey-goosey, and isn't that wonderful?
Who else? I'm sure there are lots of people. When I get home, I'll think of them.
You can phone me. You can send me an email. Well, how would you describe the expat community back then? I don't think that really applies so much to you
Back
because
then, no, it's not that
back
long
then
ago.
is not that far away. But things do change, and question 9, all change has positive and negative elements. Can you think of some of the positive changes that expats have brought to Lakeside? Well, we just mentioned a couple.
Yes.
Lakeside Little Theater.
Lakeside Little Theatre, Naked Stage. But these are all expat cultural things
Yeah.
in the English language. Of course, we don't all speak Spanish. So my Spanish is not very good, even though I've been here a long time. because you don't get to talk a lot to people, and I can't really carry on a conversation. I can make myself understood, but you know, they talk very fast, so it's difficult to carry on a conversation. But you're talking about the expat community.
Positive changes. The
Um,
expat community. Well, the theater.
And then there's the Northern Lights series of
Yes.
concerts.
Yes.
Um,
When did that start? About 10 years ago?
something like that. In terms of negative changes, I used to volunteer for the Musical Appreciation Society, which put on concerts. And I think it's kind of sad that actually couldn't make a go of it in the end. There just wasn't enough money. You can't really make enough money just on selling tickets. You have to have fundraisers and so on. That's true generally, I think. People aren't willing to really pay what it costs to bring a big orchestra here. It's just too expensive. And I think Mass should have had more fundraisers or done more promotion than they did. It's easy to be wise after the event. That's sad in a way, because I was very impressed when I first came by the quality of the music that was available. I thought that was wonderful.
Well, Viva la Musica is
But
still.
people won't pay what it really costs. So I guess you could say that's a negative thing. The auditorium has been improved physically,
Yes. Yes.
which certainly needed improvement. It was almost a fire trap. Really, I mean, if you saw the wiring, it was terrifying. It was pieced together with little bits of black tape, you know.
Well, John Keeling has been working on that for years. There was a lot. And Michael McLaughlin has done fundraisers for
Yeah.
that too. Okay, well,
And I think the English classes, teaching English, is a positive change. You know, there are some Mexicans who are really keen to learn English. Another thing that seems to happen quite a lot in Mexico is a woman will get married and probably have one or two babies, and then the husband will disappear. So what's she supposed to do? I mean, and some of these women are really courageous. They make it on their own. They'll open a hairdressing business or something. They'll learn English. And, you know,
or just even if the husbands are just
they'll make
working
it.
up north.
well, in some cases that may be what's happened. In some cases they just get abandoned.
The lady who did my garden, sort of, do you know Cuca? The Mexican lady who has she has a garden place up on the Carretera. And that's exactly what her story is. She and her husband had this business, and they had several children, 4 to 6, I can't remember the exact number. And he took off, and she said she told me this, she spent 24 hours crying, and then she just dusted herself off and approached an architect who was building a house and said, I can do the landscaping. And he said something like, you're a woman? And she said, well, I'll do it. If you don't like it, you don't have to pay me. And she has a very good business and has raised all those children. And they all work in the business with her, and she's fantastic. And
That is impressive.
it is. It's a smart lady. Doesn't look like she doesn't take a note. When you tell her what you want, she calculates everything in her head, keeps it all up there, goes away, comes back with a truckload of plants, plants them all where they're supposed to go. Amazing. Okay, what would you like to see happen here?
Well, I hope it doesn't get too crowded.
Yes.
I mean, even now, the traffic can sometimes be terrible. A lot of that is people coming from Guadalajara, actually. It's not so much the snowbirds, although you do notice it when the snowbirds leave.
Yeah.
It is a lot easier. But I hope it doesn't become, too much. I mean, right now, heat can be a bottleneck just to get through town. So, you can't do much about people coming from Guadalajara. it's natural for them. It's an outlet. Big lake, 50 along
Yeah.
the south. It's like going to the seaside. We used to go down to Brighton when I was a kid. From London. It's about the same distance, London to Brighton, Guadalajara to here.
I talked to one person recently who thinks that eventually this will become a bedroom community for Guadalajara.
Well, it already is a bit to some
Yeah.
extent, but it might be more so, People would commute, you mean, from here?
Yes, for work.
Yeah. Well, I guess I hope that doesn't happen too much anyway.
Me too. Or if they're going to do that, let's hope they all stay in Chicago.
There's already one casino. I don't want to see another one. Actually, one's enough. How many casinos do you need? I go. I have to admit, I quite enjoy those casinos.
Yeah.
Usually I lose, but sometimes I win.
You're the first person I've heard admit to this.
What, admit to winning?
No, to going to the casino.
Oh, well, no. Especially in this weather, it's cool in there.
Yeah, I go shopping. Can you predict what Lakeside will be like in 10 years?
Can I predict?
You're an actuary, Michael. Put on your actuarial hat.
Oh boy. Well, no, I don't think that's an actuarial question. But anyway, well, maybe the lake will be more utilized. Like, there's very little sort of boating or shipping, and I mean, you can get a boat from the Chapala Pier. Actually, the other day we took there was a charity thing. There's a boat that you get from, those fish restaurants down
Yeah.
towards San Juan Costa. There's a boat you can get there. It doesn't really go anywhere, it just goes around in circles in the lake. But that was quite pleasant. And maybe there'll be more activity like that. I believe the lake water, might get cleaned up. According to, what's his name? That water guy.
Todd Stone.
Todd Stone. The water's drinkable. You must have been to one of his lectures. He usually brings a bottle of lake water. He puts a tiny bit of chlorine in and then drinks it. So let's hope he's right. What can I predict what it'll be like? Well, there might be more stores, I suppose, if there's more. Well, it depends on the population. If there's more people, there'll be more stores and restaurants. A lot depends on the economy up north in the States, how many people come down, and what house prices do and so on. There's a baby bulge, isn't there? Baby boom from the Second World War.
I think we're almost done, aren't we? Well, we're going to retire.
Well,
I don't know when I'm the beginning of the baby boom. I was born in 47, and I was the first wave after my father came back from World War II, and I don't know where it stops.
but if you look at the chart of births, especially
61.
61?
if you look at the birth chart, especially for Canada, it's very steep up until about 1950 or so.
I saw a gentleman on television last night talking about when all the baby boomers leave all this money that they have been saving to their children, there's going to be, I think he said, $600 and some billion pumped into the economy. There's a whole bunch of people sitting on a whole bunch of money that they haven't spent.
But then there are people in retirement who are actually running down their savings,
Yes.
and, basically selling stock or whatever. Well,
There's
mutual
going to be a
funds.
big transfer of money from the boomers to their grandchildren.
Well,
too.
I suppose.
Very
Well,
interesting.
well, me, for example, I mean, I have 2 grandchildren. I have a life insurance policy, which I still have, and of course, I've been paying premiums for so long, I have to continue. Because if you stop paying premiums, then the week later you'll die. So, so they'll get, $100,000 just for nothing really when their granddad dies.
Well, they'll need it probably.
I suppose, nobody's immortal.
No?
So there will be a transfer, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, well, this guy was telling me.
But anyway, I guess that'll make a big difference to what happens here, whether people will still be emigrating down south. I think the demographics basically say that house prices should continue to rise here in the long run, because there'll be people wanting to move and buy houses. Although renting is a pretty good deal now.
Yes. Okay.
Anyway, I don't know. My big prediction is I don't know.
All right. So the last question is, who else should we interview?
Who else? I don't know who you've interviewed so far.
Can you think of any old timers that you've met?
Well, did you interview Alex Breton?
No, and that's a good idea.
He's been here since 1980 or something, or 85.
Yes, that's a very good idea. I'm going to write it down.
And he would like to do it, I'm sure.
Yes.
I have his email if you want to.
Oh, I do too.
Oh, you do.
I do too.
Um,
I do submit things to him on occasion.
do you know Jim Tipton?
I do.
Actually, I just did a naked stage play. I don't know if you saw it.
I did.
Did you enjoy it?
Yes.
He made his debut at Naked Stage. He had such fun. He enjoyed himself. Did you like the play?
I did. We talked about this.
Yeah.
The double ending.
Yeah, it's a clever ending.
Very good. It was very. I enjoyed it very much. I went with.
I'm not sure that people understood that at the end of the first scenario, he actually shoots himself. I'm not sure if that was clear.
No, Jim. Jim's
Yeah,
character
the
shoots himself?
part that he was playing. Well, remember he says, there'll be no tomorrow, my life is at an end or something. And then he goes off and she says, he's got a gun. And then there's a shot. You're supposed to believe that he shot him.
Oh, I missed that.
I think it's not maybe very clear.
That's because they're all still sitting on the
They're all
stage.
sitting on stage, that's right.
Yeah, that's-
If he'd been lying on the floor, you would...
Okay, it's a wrap. Thank
Okay.
you very